Certainly.
Here's Section 1, The Forgotten Legacy, written with a minimum of 700 words. Section 1, The Forgotten Legacy. The Galactic Council was ancient. So old in fact, that some of its oldest member species no longer remembered how or why they had joined. Records had been lost in millennia of bureaucracy and revisionist history. Dominated by high-minded Zarelian scholars, the crystalline Zarn, and the bureaucratically perfect Valari Consortium, the Council governed with the confidence of beings who had long since forgotten war. Humanity, once a member of the Council, had faded from collective memory like a rumor whispered during a storm. Their name barely appeared in archives, redacted, marked obsolete, or dismissed as apocryphal. To most of the galaxy, the species known as Terrans were primitive outliers, an evolutionary fluke that had likely wiped itself out in one of its many civil wars. No one remembered the siege of Uratha's Eye. No one spoke of the human void war that had once torn across 3 spiral arms. And certainly, no one dared mention the day Earth's dreadnought fleet turned the tide of the first entropic collapse. They had been heroes. And they had walked away. Now, the galaxy teetered again. A new anomaly rippled across the frontier sectors, entropic storms, disappearing colonies, and distortion fields that bent time and language. Ships sent to investigate failed to return. Those that did were twisted beyond repair, with crew members raving about the dark between the stars and voices that spoke in dead languages. The Valari attempted to contain the disturbance with logic barriers and quantum nullifiers. The Zarn proposed a diplomatic envoy, an absurd notion considering the phenomenon consumed entire systems in silence. And the Zarelians, proud in their wisdom, insisted that it was a natural cycle, one they could model and therefore control. But control failed. One by one, border sectors went dark. Communications fizzled. Trade convoys stopped returning. Refugee ships poured into the core systems, their logs corrupted, their navigators broken. Within the high chamber of the Council, the debate turned frantic. "They are phantoms, nothing more," hissed Chancellor Verne of the Zarelians, his crystalline skin refracting with annoyance. "A natural anomaly, not a threat. It is a test for our science." "And if science fails?" countered Th. Lorik of the Drax Coalition, a younger species with war-born instincts.
"What then?"
Whispers filled the chamber. Some spoke of resurrection protocols. Others urged evacuation of Rim territories. But one voice rose above the clamor, a small, unassuming voice belonging to junior diplomatic archivist Kethmarin of the Solarikin. I found something," he said, holding up a battered data core.
"A reference."
"An archived file from a pre-collapse era. It mentions the Terran Protocol." Chancellor Verne let out a crystalline chime of disdain. "Mythology." "No," Keth insisted, trembling. "Not myth. The Terrans, they fought something like this before. There are logs, strategy maps, and instructions." "Humans are extinct," said another council member, flatly. "That's what we assumed," Keth replied. "But what if they're not?" The room fell into silence. An awkward, ancient silence, the kind only felt when something deeply uncomfortable is unearthed. Councillor Wyandry of the Valari leaned forward. "You suggest we contact a species lost to time and legend, whose war tactics were deemed barbaric and dangerous even in their day." "I suggest," said Keth, a little firmer now, "that if they survived once, they might help us survive again."
A long pause. The Council voted.
By a margin of 3, the motion passed. A stealth delegation, non-military, would be sent toward the coordinates once known as Sol System.
No fleet escort.
No open declaration. If humans existed, they might see such posturing as hostile. If they didn't, it would be one more dead system among many. The delegation, composed of scientists, diplomats, and one battle-scarred captain from the Draxian military, set course for the edge of the Orion Spur. They passed through abandoned warp relays, broken stations, and ghost fleets frozen in silence. Everywhere they looked, they found only death and echoes. Then, finally, they reached it. Sol. The star still burned with fierce golden light. A single moon orbited a blue planet, ringed by debris. Initial scans showed no active signals, no space traffic.
Earth was quiet. Too quiet.
The Valari diplomat tapped her comms. "Are you sure this is the right place?" "Absolutely," said Keth. This was humanity's homeworld. And as they stared down at the silent planet, clouds swirling over oceans and continents, a single pulse of light flickered from the surface. Then another. Rhythmic. Deliberate. A pattern. A message. Someone was still there. And they were watching. "Would you like to continue with Section 2, The Sleeping Giant now, 700 plus words?" "Certainly." Here's Section 2, The Sleeping Giant, written with a minimum of 700 words. ##### Section 2, The Sleeping Giant. Earth was not dead.
It was hidden.
As the delegation's ship drifted silently into high orbit, its sensors were suddenly rendered blind. Every system, from navigational AI to sensor arrays, went dark for precisely 43 seconds. No weapon fired. No visible attack.
Just nothing. A perfect blackout.
Then, just as mysteriously, everything powered back on.
Lights flickered. Engines hummed.
And the crew found themselves not where they had been, but several hundred kilometers to the starboard side of Earth's synchronous orbit. A voice crackled through the comms. Calm, crisp, unmistakably human. "We see you." The words came with no known language signature, bypassing translation matrices and neural language filters entirely. It was direct, instinctive. The delegation's Valari linguist blinked in confusion. "We request audience," said Kethmaran, stepping forward hesitantly. "We come on behalf of the Galactic Council."
There was silence. Then, "Request acknowledged.
Landing protocols transmitting now.
Do not deviate. Do not bring weapons. Earth has changed." The signal cut.
A single corridor through the thick debris field cleared, as if parted by invisible hands. The delegation ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a seed falling through layers of time. But what they found below was nothing like the Earth of ancient records. Gone were the sprawling arcologies, the megacities that once pierced the clouds. In their place stood vast natural landscapes, forests, plains, oceans, untouched, pristine. Towering mountain ranges stretched across the continents. Rivers flowed clear. Cities were nowhere to be seen. Yet it was not primitive. As they landed in a clearing, their scanners began picking up structures, buried beneath the earth, woven into the terrain itself. The soil was laced with microfilament networks. The trees were artificial organic hybrids, each one a solar energy collector and atmospheric processor. The entire planet was alive, engineered for balance.
Then they arrived.
A group awaited them, tall, broad-shouldered figures in sleek, seamless armor that shimmered like oil in sunlight. No weapons were visible, but the aura they projected was unmistakable. These were not diplomats. These were warriors. At the center stood a figure who looked almost ordinary. A woman, perhaps in her 40s by human appearance, with silver streaks in her hair and eyes that seemed to look through time itself. "I am Elias Rune," she said. "Speaker for the Terran Continuum."
Keth stepped forward. "We come seeking help. A threat has emerged.
It consumes systems without warning. We believe you may have faced it before." Elias nodded slowly.
The Between.
"Yes. We encountered it once long ago.
We stopped it.
But not without cost." She motioned for them to follow. They walked across a field of wildflowers that shimmered faintly with data pulses. The delegation noticed movement, small drones, indistinguishable from insects, monitoring everything. The sky was clear, yet strange flashes appeared at the edge of their vision, orbital platforms, cloaked and silent. They descended into a hidden chamber beneath the field. A vast archive stretched out before them, columns of glowing data, suspended mid-air, forming an ocean of history. Here, Elias activated a hologram, footage from a time before galactic peace.
Ships burning. Planets torn apart.
A war not against armies, but against entropy itself.
The Between is not a species, she explained. It is a state of unbeing.
A hunger that arises when galaxies grow complacent, when thought decays into repetition and diversity fades. It preys on stagnation.
Keth swallowed.
The council has grown slow. Proud. "We noticed," Elias said flatly. "That is why we left. The galaxy was not ready to understand what we had become. So we withdrew.
We watched. We waited."
"Will you help us?" Elias looked at the others. Silent conversation passed between them, glances, gestures, things the delegation couldn't interpret. "We swore never to interfere again," she said. "The galaxy must learn to stand without us." "But it's dying," Keth whispered. She paused, then reached into a wall panel. A hologram shimmered to life. It showed a star system recently devoured, distorted space, fragments of ships drifting like ash. Then another hologram, of a council fleet, struggling against the tide.
Then another. This time, a human dreadnought.
Sleek, dark, a monolithic engine of war. Its presence alone seemed to bend space. It launched a single pulse of energy, and the storm stopped.
Silence followed.
"That ship was from the old days," Elias said. one of the first generation of Omega-class dreadnoughts.
One survived.
And if one remains? She turned to the others.
Then it's time. Another voice spoke, deeper, older.
An elder human with faded tattoos, a long coat lined with command ribbons from another age. The council forgot who we were, he said quietly. Maybe it's time we remind them. Outside, the sky darkened as something massive moved in low orbit. A shape emerged from the clouds, a ship not designed for war, but for deterrence. A Terran vessel from the time when the stars themselves bowed to Earth's might. Humanity had never vanished. They had become legend. Now they were returning. Would you like me to continue with Section 3, When Titans Walk Again, minimum 700 words?
Certainly.
Here's Section 3, When Titans Walk Again, written with a minimum of 700 words. #### Section 3, When Titans Walk Again. They came not with banners or fanfare, not with declarations or posturing. When humanity returned to the stars, it was with the silence of a blade being unsheathed. The skies above Earth rippled as portals shimmered into being, precisely aligned wormholes that glowed with hues no council race had ever seen. From them emerged ships that dwarfed anything in the modern galactic arsenal. These were not elegant, nor streamlined.
They were functional. Brutal.
Obsidian black hulls laced with fractal armor, bristling with energy channels that pulsed like veins. Ships that looked more like monuments than machines, monuments to a war-forged legacy. And at the heart of it all, the Vanguard Eternum, last of the Omega-class dreadnoughts, led the charge. In the war rooms of the Galactic Council, panic surged. Sensor networks across dozens of sectors lit up with unknown warp signatures. Military analysts scrambled to identify the newcomers. A council admiral from the Zarelian core world issued an order to engage. He was quickly and quietly relieved of duty by an emergency vote.
These ships were Terran.
And they were not to be antagonized. Deploy observers, said Councillor Wyandry. We need to see if these stories were true.
They found out soon enough.
The outer rim system of Targo 7, once a thriving trade hub, had become a battleground. The Between had arrived 2 days prior, warped rifts tearing through space like infected wounds. Council fleets held the line desperately, ships vanishing in streaks of unlight as time fractured and reality bent inward. Then the humans arrived. The Vanguard Eternum exited its fold space conduit in total silence, followed by a phalanx of support vessels. The Council fleet captain on site, a Valari named Thonver, tried to hail them. There was no response. Human comms remained dark. Instead, they acted. The Vanguard's main cannon fired once, a focused singularity bolt that collapsed an entire rift like a fist crushing glass. At the same time, dozens of smaller Terran vessels deployed their payloads, drone swarms laced with anti-entropy coding, quantum anchors to stabilize spacetime, and weaponry that seemed to function as much through intention as engineering. From the bridge of his ship, Captain Thonver could only stare in awe. One moment, his fleet had been dissolving, dying. The next, the enemy, if it could be called that, was pushed back. And then, humanity deployed ground troops. They did not arrive in dropships. They descended like lightning. Encased in armor that shimmered with refractive plating, human operatives deployed through direct orbital drop, impacting the surface of Targo 7 with enough force to crack rock. Once on the ground, they moved with perfect coordination, executing strategies that had no precedent in council tactics. Every move was pre-planned. Every bullet knew its mark. Some humans carried weapons that looked centuries out of date: mag-accelerated railguns, kinetic hammers, even monomolecular blades. Others wielded tech beyond comprehension: mind-linked tactical networks, swarm-based shielding, and zero-point adaptive armor that changed shape mid-combat. Where the Between had overwhelmed council troops, human soldiers cut through them like mythic reapers. A single human Vanguard trooper, callsign Ashate, was recorded wading through a dimensional breach, dragging back a captured piece of the Between. The being screamed in 1,000 dialects, shifting shape as it tried to escape. But the human remained still, armored fist clenched tight. Containment complete, she said, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. That footage spread through the galaxy in hours. Myths had become reality. By the end of the week, 3 systems were reclaimed. Human fleet commands didn't ask for permission. They moved according to an internal logic, refusing to brief council leaders or include their ships in formation. Yet every engagement was a victory. Council commanders, trained in theory and doctrine, were stunned by the brutality and efficiency. Humanity didn't just repel the enemy, they erased it. Their presence was like a surgical fire, cleansing rot from the galactic wound. But there was no celebration. No press conferences. No demands for recognition. When a council ambassador attempted to formally welcome the Terran Continuum back into the galactic fold, Elias Rune replied with a calm statement. "We are not returning. We are reminding." That was when the council began to understand. Humanity had never wanted dominion. They had not craved thrones or territory. They had been warriors of necessity, guardians born of chaos. They withdrew because the galaxy no longer deserved their fury. But now, that fury had returned, controlled, measured, precise. Even council civilians, watching the war unfold via live feeds and filtered broadcasts, began to feel the change. Children whispered about the shadow men from Earth. Poets wrote of the long silence broken by black ships. And soldiers, young, frightened, failing, felt a renewed sense of purpose standing in the shadow of Terran war engines. Because when the Titans walked again, the stars held their breath. Would you like me to continue with Section 4, Lessons Burned in the Stars, minimum 700 words?
Certainly.
Here's Section 4, Lessons Burned in the Stars, written with a minimum of 700 words. ##### Section 4, Lessons Burned in the Stars.
The war wasn't won in a moment.
Even with humanity's return, the Between fought back.
It evolved. It learned.
It twisted logic and matter alike, turning entire moons into screaming anomalies and rewriting physics in places where space no longer followed rules. But the tide had turned. With the Terrans leading the charge, worlds once lost were reclaimed. Star systems darkened by despair began to flicker with hope. And then, one day, without warning, it stopped. The last rift closed near the edge of the Andelian expanse.
No final battle. No triumphant explosion. Just silence.
A stillness that settled across the galaxy like fresh snow over old scars. Some council members feared a trap. Others believed the threat had simply fed enough and retreated. But the Terrans knew better. Elias Rune stood at the head of the council summit, a rare in-person gathering of all ruling species, held on the ancient diplomatic world of Hierarchy's Prime. It was the first time humanity had accepted a public invitation since their return. Counselors from every corner of the galaxy filled the chamber, scaled, furred, silicon-based, photonic, even fungal minds represented through proxy avatars. All had gathered to ask the same question. What now? The Grand Speaker of the Council, a shimmering entity of light from the Ilith Enclave, welcomed the Terrans back with honorifics and ceremonial gestures. She spoke of unity, of shared victory, of rebuilding together. Of offering humanity a permanent seat on the High Council once again. Elias remained silent. Then the older human, the one known only as Marshal Idran Kai, stepped forward. His voice, deep and weathered, echoed through the hall without amplification.
"You want us to lead?" he asked. "To guide your fleets? Reshape your laws? Become your shield and your sword?" Counselors murmured in agreement. "No," Kai said simply. "That's the problem." The room fell into stunned silence. "You forgot us because you wanted to," Elias added. "We fought your wars. We died in your shadows. When the threat ended, you erased us, because our existence reminded you of what you weren't ready to become." Kai's eyes, cold and sharp as broken stone, scanned the chamber. "Power isn't glory. It's burden. And when we laid ours down, none of you picked it up. You let it rot. That's why the Between returned." The Zarn representative slithered forward nervously. "But your weapons, your knowledge, surely you must teach us now? Surely, the threat warrants unity." "You don't need our weapons," Elias said. "You need memory. You need humility. You need to understand that civilization isn't a destination, it's a daily choice. You let the council become a throne instead of a table. You let politics devour purpose." "We won't repeat your mistakes," one of the younger counselors insisted. "You already have," Kai replied. Elias stepped aside and projected a final image into the chamber, a map of the galaxy, overlaid with Terran-controlled systems. Dozens of them. Most had no idea the Terrans were even there. Hidden stations, cloaked planets, deep space relay hubs. "We've never been gone," she said. "We've been watching. Quietly. Carefully." The offer was simple. Humanity would not rejoin the Council, but they would help form a new alliance. One founded not on hierarchy, but accountability. A pact of remembrance. Each member would agree to maintain open knowledge of historical wars, ethical warfare, and responsible exploration. AI would be restricted from autonomous war decisions. Dimensional rift monitoring would be mandatory. And every species would contribute, not wealth, not tribute, but service. Real, physical commitment. No empire exempt. Many opposed it. But none dared vote it down. The pact passed. Years passed.
Terran fleets returned to their hidden stations. Earth remained cloaked, its presence known only to those who earned the right to land. The myth faded again, but now, it was guarded myth. In Council military academies, cadets studied Terran tactics not with awe, but responsibility. Cultural programs across the galaxy taught of the Void War and the sacrifice of forgotten warriors. Children no longer whispered about shadow men, they saluted the memory of those who reminded the galaxy how to stand. On a quiet outpost above Jupiter's moon Callisto, Marshal Kai walked alone through a garden of obsidian stone. Each stone bore a name, some human, some alien, those who fell during the resurgence. Elias joined him, carrying a small data slab. The Valari are opening their first warrior school in 1,000 years, she said softly. Named it after Ashate. Kai smiled faintly. About time they got their hands dirty. They paused at a larger monument, taller than the rest. A polished black pillar with a single phrase etched into it in hundreds of languages.
We were forgotten, not broken.
We returned not to conquer, but to remind.
A wind moved through the garden. Artificial. Programmed. But it still felt like Earth.
Kai closed his eyes. The galaxy had learned. And as long as the stars burned, so too would the lesson. Would you like a complete compiled version of all 4 sections in one document?